quick thank you to Art for supporting what we're doing here, and a huge thank you to Roger Goodell for joining us this morning. And as we've only now, you're our second conversation. We started the last one by saying, what do you think of the election? And given your pulse on America and all of the fans around the country, was it a surprise for you?
I think it was a surprise in that, I'm listening a lot to the reports that we're getting on the media. And in fact, I spoke to the head of a media network late afternoon and said it'd be over by 8:30, the other way. And so, I think it ultimately ended up being a surprise. But you could see, I think our country is going through a transition. And there's a lot of divisiveness, and there's a lot of people who are looking for a different direction. And so that part of it didn't necessarily surprise me.
Did you know that Donald Trump thinks that you and the NFL may be responsible for the reason he is president? I want to read you something from Sports Illustrated. You declined he bid to buy the Buffalo Bills, and you didn't give it to him. He says, "I'm glad I lost, because if I bought the Buffalo Bills, I probably would not be running for president, which is much more important." So how much responsibility do you want to take for all that?
I guess I've got to take a lot of responsibility for it, I guess. I had not heard that. I knew he was interested in the Bills, but that was done by the previous ownership of the Bills, and it never got to our table.
Do you think there's going to be an impact, the Donald Trump presidency, on the NFL in any meaningful way?
I think that it's yet to be told on that. I think we're going to have to see where it goes. It's obvious he has a stronger position about regulation and unnecessary regulation and freeing up that. I don't know whether that'll have an impact. A lot of what impacts us, Andrew, is the media world, how that's transitioning. Technology is transitioning, how we reach our fans. And so that's something that we're particularly interested in, obviously, is making sure that we have the flexibility to use that technology to reach our fans.
I want to get into ratings and into the NFL business, but I have two more political questions, if you'd indulge me. This, he said, I don't know if you heard this, at a rally in Massachusetts this past January, Trump was asked whether he would fire you if he were president, and he said yes.
So I guess I feel better. I do mention that you said that in Massachusetts, correct?
He said that in Massachusetts.
There you go. But listen, I get that too, so I should feel better, I guess.
How do you feel, though, about players and coaches getting involved in politics?
I think that's their right. Listen, we all have that constitutional right. It's something that if they find that that's something of importance to them, I think our players and our coaches are community leaders, and they should speak up when they see something that they feel is important to them, to their communities, and I support that. I think obviously they have to do it in a responsible fashion, but they're citizens like the rest of us.
But so what does that mean, then? And we can get into Colin Kaepernick, and I wanted to talk about some of that in a minute, but in terms of, Belichick came out, then there was the controversy over whether Tom Brady supported Donald Trump or not. Goodell said he didn't. He said who knows? But
that's where I am, yes.
But as a brand, the brand that is the NFL, you've talked about protecting the shield.
Sure.
What is the right way for a player, a coach, somebody from the brand to go about talking about politics or some of these other larger societal issues?
Well, I think the most important thing is if you want to be active in those things, spend your time doing that. When people come to a football game, they love to focus on the game, right? They want to be not distracted by other issues. They want to make sure that player A is focusing on playing football that day. So I think that's a big part of what fans expect, and I think we all expect. But you can't remove them from their position in society. They are high profile. They are people that obviously get a great deal of attention through the media, and when they make a statement about a belief that they may have or something that they feel strongly about, and they're active in their communities trying to make those changes, I think that's a good thing, Andrew.
Okay, let's talk media, and we'll come back to some of this because I think it may or may not have an impact on things like ratings. But as you know, I saw them in the hallway, and I said, it feels like it's been the past tough couple of weeks, and you said football. The ratings have been down. And the NFL is one of those sports and institutions that people felt in the world of TV that was the last bastion. Live sports was the thing that was going to save traditional TV as we know it. And now it feels or looks like there's cracks in that. Do you agree with that?
No, not at all. Listen, I think, you always have cycles. Interesting enough, the president of the Premier League called me, and they're having similar rating issues with soccer over in Europe. So these things are cyclical. They're a reflection of multiple issues. I don't think there's any one particular issue. We don't dismiss any particular theory. We run them all down. We work at it. We try to see what it is we can do. But, over the last 10 years, you've seen NFL ratings go up 27% and primetime ratings going down 36%. But you're seeing another shift, I think, here in the media world that we have been anticipating. As an example, last year, we took a game and we put it on Google, on Yahoo. And we put a game on that, I still have Eric in my head. But what you see here is a real shift in how people want to consume the media. That's why we're also doing the Twitter experiment with our Triplecast this year, allowing our consumers to find new ways to engage, new platforms, and also be able to interact with it. And so these are the things that we've been working on, and we see these shifts starting to come out a little bit more. So that's a big focus of ours in the past few years. But we also look at the pace of the game, Andrew. That's one of the things, should the games be shorter? We've been focused on this for several years. We obviously want to take as much what we call dead time, non-action, out of the game, so that we can make the game more exciting. It's all action. Can we do instant replay quicker than we've done it in the past? Should we look at ways to maybe take some commercialization out of the game, either in less ads or maybe have the ads come in different ways in the traditional, what we call pods, which are 2 minutes and 20 seconds. These types of things, I think, are really important to how we evaluate them with our partners, with advertisers, with sponsors, to make sure that we're doing where we keep our game as exciting and where everybody wants to see it. But people are still engaging with our game at the same levels. They may not be engaging as long. And that can have a number of issues. You might have a bad game. You can have a lot of counter programming that could be attractive at that time, which you have to make. And those are all facts of the world. We don't make them as excuses. We say, well, that's what we got to deal with.
Let me ask you this. I spent some time with Les Moonves on stage in San Francisco at a Vanity Fair event just a couple weeks ago, and he says, has the NFL sliced it and diced it too much? Is there too much product out there? I don't know, but I've been surprised that the numbers are down. When you think about the slicing and dicing, the idea that there's Twitter, there's Thursday night, there's Sunday night, what's too much, what's too little? How are you thinking about that right now?
Yeah, it's a big issue. You always want to get up to that line but never cross it.
Right.
And I think that's true for anybody. But for us, that's exactly how we've done it. That's how we've moved very slowly with Thursday Night Football, as an example. We started with 6 games and then went to 8 and 13 and 16. And we don't know what the right combination of that is. And that's why we're only doing short-term deals with Les Moonves and this year with NBC. So what we try to do is find the right balance there, where, the great thing about football is it's a very short season. It's only 17 weeks and then playoffs. And every game counts, and that makes our inventory incredibly valuable. But you also have got to be careful of taking it and broadening it out and saturating the market with it. And that's something that we're very conscious of.
We're going to be talking to Tom Rutledge and Richard Plepler of HBO in just a little bit. And one of the conversations I know we're going to have is about unbundling and the future of all of that, and the idea and the worries already even around ESPN and the valuations there. And ultimately, by the way, not just the valuation of ESPN and where that all goes, but the valuation, therefore, then of the leagues, because you have then different, you're going to have the regional networks across the board.
Yeah, and we're not one that's very reliant on regional sports networks, as you know. One of the things that we focus on is making our game available to the broadest possible audience and making every game on a national platform. Thursday night, we require every team to play on Thursday night. That's part competitive issues. It's also very much a part of trying to create national brands with our 32 teams. We don't want to have just 3 or 4 teams that are the attention. We want to have 32 teams.
Right.
Very difficult to do, but giving them that national stage is a big part of that.
Let me ask you a different question. We have a number of CEOs who are in the audience today, and usually you have 1 or 2 constituents. Oftentimes it's the customer and maybe the shareholders or something along those lines, maybe regulators somewhere in between. You have many. You have owners, you have sponsors. Ingenuity is going to be here, a big sponsor of the NFL. You have the fans, you have the players, you have suppliers, you have the media networks. How do you prioritize those?
You really don't. To me, they're all important. And so what you want to do is to me, they're partners. You call them constituents, I call them partners. They're people that we rely on to make sure that our league stays strong. They give us great input. I speak to Indra all the time. She's got a great perspective. And our players give me a lot of great ideas. Our coaches do. Our owners do. But you need all of that. And I think that's one of the fundamental aspects of our success, including media partners, by the way. We've got 4 network partners that all give us tremendous feedback of how and what we should be doing. So as you're dealing with ratings, they give us a tremendous amount of feedback and work with us on that.
And when you talk about protecting the shield, it's a phrase you use all the time, the brand. I said it felt like a past couple tough weeks. I brought, by the way, in my packet of things, a cover of Business Week magazine. Have you seen this? This is very tough. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
You have not read? You've not read? You're on it. This is the cover, NFL. It says Sunday night concussions, this is tough stuff. Concussions, domestic violence, Kaepernicking, lousy football, millennial cord cutting. You're probably watching this insane election anyway. Behind the league's scary ratings slump. And so I don't mean to come back to the issue, but I guess what I'm trying to understand is, and maybe it is football, and maybe you've been living under this spotlight for so long, but you look at all of those issues, and then you have to deal with, who's calling you about all of this? The owners, the
Andrew,
sponsors?
I keep on my desk a Sports Illustrated article from 1978 that has a similar headline, almost the exact same headline. That's the media focuses on an immediate issue, and I understand that. We get that. But for us, we're playing long-term here. Right. I think this segment is called
Playing for the long term. This is the long term.
That's even better. But the reality, we played long term here, and so yeah, as a high profile business with a lot of pieces, a lot of issues that we need to deal with on any given day. Yeah, sure, there's challenges out there, but you need to deal with them with a long term focus, not a short term focus.
Okay, so here's to me the existential long term challenge to the business that is the NFL, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is the issue of concussions and the issue of the next generation of kids and whether they're going to play. And when you hear people like Terry Bradshaw say he's not going to let his kids or wouldn't let his kids play, or you hear, how do you think about that issue?
Well, again, you say Terry Bradshaw, but we have over 20,000 players. You would have a hard time coming up with too many names that would say that. Most people love this game, love to be able to play this game and take great values away from playing the game. And we're seeing that on all levels. So yes, we want to make sure that the health of the game is healthy from youth to high school to college.
Do you see though? Is that you think that's not? Am I wrong about? I mean, when you guys sit around on a board,
we've said for a long time our number one priority is health and safety of our players.
Right.
That is very important for us, and we are doing, I think, tremendous work. But we've got a long ways to go. We've got more work to do. We're learning a great deal. I think we're making some tremendous strides with the medical community and investing in research. We've made some great changes to equipment that I think has been helpful, and investing in what I think will be new technology to help the helmets. And I think our rule changes, we've made 42 rule changes in the last 10 years that have been focused on safety, which take techniques out of the game. They get the game, so the game is still tough. But it is, you want to make sure that it...
So, and then the question is, how do you then balance it? Because I will say, bring it back to the election, Donald Trump, as you know, a couple months ago, said he thought actually the league had gone soft, the opposite, which is that he wasn't worried about concussions or new helmet technology, that he thought that the game needed to be even harder. So how do you balance the entertainment piece of it, if you will?
Well, I think we've proven that you can make the game better, safer, and more exciting. And I think you can do all three of those. And we've done that over the decades.
Tell us
And
about...
as a matter of fact, let me tell you a story which is, to me, is very interesting. It happened in 1905. And our then president took a strong position saying the game's got to change. He called the NCAA in because we didn't exist. And he said the game has to change. There's too many skull fractures. And they made changes to the game, which ultimately brought in the forward pass and made the game a heck of a lot more exciting. So you can see these changes that are done in a way that can make the game safer, take techniques out, but also make sure that we do the right thing for the game long.
Tell us, given that we just saw Eric Schmidt, and actually there's some pretty interesting, I don't know if they're here at the moment, some interesting technology people who are going to be here, I think, this afternoon. Tell us about the technology in the helmets, because I've heard some pretty interesting stuff is it's coming soon.
Well, we are investing $100 million to develop new technology that can make a better helmet, essentially, which we think can happen in the next 3 to 5 years. We've developed an engineering roadmap with experts and scientists, and we think that we can do that, which is using new materials that will absorb the impact and take it to a larger portion of the body. And that's the kind of thing that we're trying to look at. And that can be done in helmets, it can be done in shoulder pads, it can be done in other areas, which is what we try to focus on as all injuries. What can we do to make the game safer by using that technology? And I think we're pretty excited about this. We've seen some changes already that have been beneficial, but you also have to combine that with the rule changes. There's not just one solution here. You've got to continue that.
Do you see changes in terms of younger people playing or not playing football?
No, actually, we saw a higher number of people playing the game last year on the youth level. I go to youth games all the time. I go to high school games, so we're not seeing that. But we're always conscious of all that. You always have to do that. One of the big trends I see in youth sports are kids at an earlier age playing one sport. I grew up playing 3 sports. I loved it from season to season I went, and I think that's great for kids to play multiple sports. But you see pressures, whether it's pressures for recruiting, pressures for scholarships, pressures to get into the right college. Kids are starting to be a little bit more focused on one sport and playing it all year round, which leads to another phenomenon, which is overuse injuries. So to me, I want to see kids, and I have twin girls who are 15, I want to see them playing multiple sports. They play tennis in the fall, they play lacrosse in the spring, and they're active, and we want to see our kids active.
When you think about the business that is the NFL, it clearly dominates the media here in the United States. What does it look like ultimately, talk about playing for the long term, as a global business? Do you think there's ever an opportunity to truly have teams in other countries? Do you see this as a global sport in that way? I remember spending time with Adam Silver. He thinks, they've invested a lot in VR. And he used to think maybe we'd have teams in other countries. Now he thinks maybe people from other countries will just be able to watch in their living room as if they're in the front row.
Yeah, listen, we've just announced another VR deal today, and we announced one last week. So we're very much focused on that technology of how you can bring the consumer into a perspective that they may not be able to see. So that is clearly a part of our initiative. But we also believe bringing the game to the fans on a global basis is very positive also. We played 3 games in London this year at 2 different stadiums. 80,000 people sold out in a matter of moments. We're playing in Mexico in less than 2 weeks, and that sold out in less than an hour and had over 100,000 people sign up for 4 tickets. So we've got tremendous interest, but they really do want to see real competitive games with the best players. We had a series of preseason games. They saw the value of that, and they weren't as interested in that. So we changed our strategy and brought the real game. So do I think a team can move to an international market? Yes, I think the UK could do that. We're still trying to balance, could we do it and maintain the same competitive balance that we have throughout the league, which is critical.
What's the experience on Twitter been?
Very good. The most important thing was to make sure we delivered on the technology and that we could, as you watch on your phone or your device, Twitter, that it was a high quality experience. And I must admit, I was blown away by the quality of it. There's still a little bit of a latency issue that we're trying to deal with. Technology will improve that. We'll get better at that. There's a question about as you're scrolling through all the feedback, and the latency is creating a little bit of an issue because that's delayed. And they're already talking about the touchdown. You haven't seen it yet. So that kind of thing will get fixed with technology. But we think it's a great experience, and that's where our consumers are going. We want to engage them on any platform they want to be.
I don't know how candidly you can answer this. Are you long Twitter? Meaning, what do you think of Twitter as a technology company these days?
Well, I think they're changing their strategy, and we were a big part of it. And that's what, to a large extent, they sold us on. We want to live stream longer form video, and we think that the NFL and live sports is something we want to do that on. After they did the deal with us, they went out and they immediately did deals with other leagues. Right. And it seems to be working quite well for them. I'm not an expert, but they've been a great partner for us.
Gambling. Wanted to ask you about your views on gambling on games. Specifically, by the way, Chris Christie, if he's part of the new Trump administration, he tried to push through sports gambling in New Jersey. I wonder whether you think he'll try to do it across the country, and whether you'd be supportive of that.
You know, there have been efforts to do that. We have opposed that. We think that legalized sports betting on team sports is really not the best interest of the sports, which is my first priority. We could address whether it's the best thing for society, but I'm not in that camp. But we also recognize that people do it. And so we just want to make sure it doesn't impact in the integrity of the game, Andrew. That's the big thing for us, is when, people talk about fantasy sports and daily fantasy. Right. They're not betting on the outcome of a game. They're betting on individual players and performances there. We don't see as much risk to that as we do with legalized sports.
Because the risk is what? And people talk, by the way, that it adds to the engagement factor, remarkably so.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think fantasy does. I think other forms of engaging them does. Yes, there's no question about that. But you don't want anyone to think that the outcome of a game is influenced by anything other than the competition on the field. That it's pure, and that's what you have to protect about. And we do it today. Right. We have to make sure this is one of our big risks that we always watch.
I want to open it up to the audience, but I wanted to ask, and maybe it's a tough question, and it's the thing that we haven't talked about when it comes to protecting the brand, which is to say the culture of the NFL and the domestic violence issues that have emerged, and how you've responded. How do you feel about where the league is now, what it's doing, and whether you can ever do enough, frankly?
No, you can't. Listen, I think from a league standpoint, we've taken this issue and said, how do we deal with this better? How do we learn from our experiences, and how do we manage this in a way that, one, you start with educating everybody in the NFL. And I just went through it yesterday in our office. So we educate everyone in our office, at the club level, the team.
What happens at your office when you do this?
Well, we had an education. We have experts come in and counselors come in who give us a better understanding of what your responsibility is. You could be a bystander. What's your bystander responsibility? How do you engage and how do you deal with that kind of issue? I don't think people understand the complexity of some of these issues, particularly domestic violence. And what we try to do is to bring in experts who are there full-time on the investigative side, because we don't want to be completely reliant on law enforcement. We gather our information as much as we can from law enforcement. We'll work with them. We'll try to get that information. Sometimes we can't get it from them. So we'll try to gather as much information outside of that. Sometimes it's on a delayed basis. When we get that information, we apply our policy. And here's good news about the policy. We redid our personal conduct policy, as we call it, 2 years ago, and we saw a 40% drop over the next year in our player arrest. We saw this year, right now, we're at a 30% reduction off of that. So we're seeing a very significant impact on educating and helping players deal with situations, coaches, league office executives, team executives. We want to teach them how to handle situations so they avoid problems, they avoid getting into problems. And it's been an effective on the education, but then there's also a discipline component, which you have to have. Ultimately, people violate that conduct, and I think People hold
what's-
the NFL
what-
to a very high
A
standard.
very high standard. But what I was going to ask is, what's the theory in your mind in terms of when discipline is necessary? At what point do you need to wait, do you think, for law enforcement?
Well, if you don't have all the information, you sometimes have to, and sometimes you don't. And so if you have to deal with whatever information you have at the time. And if you make a decision, then you obviously can take into account anything that may come into your consideration. You didn't have access to that information, and that's happened before.
Right. Let's open up to questions. I know there's a lot of people who have a number of issues that they want to ask you about. There's a hand going up right here in the third row here, if we could get him a microphone real quick. Can we get this gentleman here?
Thank you. So you guys talked a lot about fan engagement in terms of ratings and player advocacy. And in the past few years, especially with Twitter, you saw a lot of fan advocacy, especially to the sport. Like Barstool probably tripled their valuation with Deflategate. I'm a Bills fan. Just the other day, there was the Richard Sherman Carpenter issue. The next day, the league said we made a mistake. There are a lot of tweets about that. What kind of roles do you guys see in fan advocacy in the game?
Well, I think the fans have always had a big impact on the NFL and what we do, because that's who we serve ultimately. We want to, and fans are changing. It goes back to the point we were talking about before. Do we change the presentation of a game? Whether you're consuming it through media or you're in the stadium, there are different experiences, and we have to make those the best possible experiences. So fans give us an awful lot of feedback on that. I was out in Giant Stadium in the parking lot last week, and I got a lot of feedback. Believe me, I get it in Buffalo too, by the way. And but you want to hear that, and I think they have an influence on us because I've heard from fans several times about rule changes. They were actually, a fan was part of our overtime rule change going back a couple of years. You have to keep your eyes and ears open to all of that and absorb it and use it properly. We can't meet every fan's position, particularly when it comes to officiating, but you really want to make sure that you're properly considering that information and having the effective changes you want in the game, either on the field or off the field, by the way.
See another question right there in the middle. Yes, sir.
Simple question. Esports apparently have emerged as a really important factor in terms of viewer time, particularly with younger people. How do all professional sports in general, and the NFL in particular, view esports as a competitive threat and/or an opportunity? And could that be part of the reason your ratings are down?
No, I don't think that's, again, we don't dismiss anything. I haven't had that issue presented to us as a reason by anybody internally or even within our partnership group. We work a lot with our partner, EA, who has the popular Madden game. And what we look at is this is an opportunity. So how do we embrace it and how do we use it? It's happening. So let's be a part of it, and let's figure out what we can do to help engage our fans even more. And that's something that I think there's a real opportunity there for us, but I think it's something where fans are going there.
Do you think, by the way, in the future that there's going to be entire professional esport leagues?
I think it's an untold story. I mean, we spent an awful lot of time with this at our league meeting recently. We have a group internally that's focusing on it. I think this is going to continue to grow and continue to develop, and I think it's a good thing so far.
Let's try to sneak in a couple more questions because I know there were some hands. Why don't we go over here?
Thank you. My name is Sanjay from Cornell University. And I had a question about officiating. A lot of time in the last couple of weeks, a lot of players and coaches have spoken out about officiating, with some even suggesting that the NFL consider full-time employees for its officials like other leagues. My question was, is the NFL considering any changes in how it officiates games? And if so, what might those be?
Well, if I thought that full-time officials would solve the problem, as you see, there are officiating mistakes in other leagues and they're full-time officials. So I don't think that's going to eliminate the human element. What we want to do is get the best people on the field to officiate the game, have them trained to the highest levels. Our officials work incredibly hard, and the reality is they do a great job, but they're going to miss calls. So what we try to do is have replay available to try to address those issues. But then you have an issue that you have to balance, and we call it the unintended consequences. How much replay do you want to have? Because it can slow the game down to a halt. So it goes back into that pace of game. If you can challenge every play, we'll be spending more of our time watching video. We will replay all scoring plays, and I get this reaction from fans quite a bit, and partners. A touchdown play, everybody's focused on it. It's a great play. It's a great time to celebrate, but we're not sure it's really a touchdown yet. So you've taken the celebration out of it. So you have to find that balance in there where you use technology to improve officiating, and you're seeing more than you've ever seen in officiating, and through that technology, you're seeing super slow-mo, high definition, and that really highlights the problem that we have with officiating, because you see more. But we also just have to figure out how to use that technology to improve it. But I think our guys do a great job, but yes, we do miss calls. There's no question about it.
There's a question right up there.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Lipscomb. I'm with Discovery Education, which is the education company within Discovery Communications, like the channel. You mentioned your work with EA Madden, and we have a great partnership with NFLPA and EA Madden Sports around football, engaging students in critical math and science concepts, football by the numbers. And statistically, there's a lot of data showing that better educated students are less likely to engage in things like domestic violence. For every year of education, you add 1 year of life to your life. So I guess my question would be, do you all have plans in terms of, I don't want to say being reactive to a lot of the domestic violence issues and things that you're coming up against, to sort of be more proactive in terms of better educating these students on the front end and like supporting education in some way so that we're kind of nipping the problem in the bud before it even comes out?
Yeah, it was interesting because I had a lengthy conversation after our training session yesterday on this issue is how do we teach, and Tony Porter's a leading expert in this area who is there, how do we teach men what it's like to be a real man and to really engage in healthy relationships and what it's like to be. And our players really can help on that front. And so we've engaged in the last couple of years what we call character camps and getting into schools and providing them an opportunity to talk about what it's like to be a real man, what it's like to conduct yourself and have healthy relationships. Because you're right, long term, if they understand that early, you're avoiding the issue in the first place, which is what everybody wants. So it's prevention. And so those character camps, I think, have been incredibly successful. We launched another phase of that at the draft this year. We're using a lot of our players to do that. And it also goes back to something even more fundamental to your point on the importance of education. It's our eligibility rules. We defended our eligibility rules in court because we believe that when young men are exposed to formal education and have that opportunity, it's only good for them long term. So instead of taking players at an earlier age, we're asking them to stay in college. And that gives them an opportunity to have the benefits of that formal education, which I'm a big believer is something that's overlooked an awful lot. And we're going to continue to stand behind that.
Let's take one final question. While we're doing that, why don't we try to get him a mic? I'm curious, by the way, the coarseness of the Donald Trump campaign and some of the comments that he made about women and other things. Does that make your job harder, do you think?
Listen, it makes my job harder at home too. I have twin daughters and a wife, and so I have to explain that to them. And so that's yes on that front. Does it make it harder publicly? Listen, I think our country has to have more respect for one another, and we have to unite. And I saw some very positive signs of that yesterday with our current president, Hillary Clinton's comments publicly, and others coming together and saying, we have to get together, we have to unite, we have to address some of the issues and work together. President-elect Trump is our president, so let's get behind it.
Fair enough. Let's take that final question up there. And yep.
Touching on the topic of the NCAA players, and what are your thoughts in about 10, 20 years time around players being paid for college sports and how that might affect the NFL brand and how that is an opportunity or threat?
Yeah, one of the things I've learned in this job is to take only what affects me directly and what I have responsibility for, and that's not one of them. So I don't take a position on that. I've had conversations with people at the college level about that to get their perspective on it and try to understand it. In some ways, it obviously does affect us because whatever happens at the college game ultimately comes into the NFL. And so I know they're dealing with a number of issues that are legal and otherwise. I'm not going to dip into that because I've got my own issues to deal with. But I think from our standpoint, we've had a great relationship with the colleges. I believe in the college game. I love to see it to become more successful. We work very closely with them on everything from scheduling to making sure that we uphold our eligibility rules, which they feel strongly about. But that specific issue is something for the colleges to deal with, not for us.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Roger Goodell, thank you for spending time with us.
You bet. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.